All right, folks, let's get going. So good morning or good afternoon, depending upon where you're joining us from. We are today going to be talking about the coming extinction of the purpose-built backup appliance. My name is Ken Shaw. I'm your host today. I'm the CEO and founder of Infrascale. My contact details are here on the screen. I'd love to hear from you after the webinar. And today we're going to be talking about the following. First, we'll start with the challenge of today's backup systems, and this should be near and dear to the heart to most folks in the audience. Then we'll talk about the rise of this new architecture, this hybrid cloud backup architecture. After that, we'll turn to the titular topic of today's webinar, the coming extinction of the purpose-built backup appliance. And I'll share with you why we here at Infrascale think it's going the way of the dinosaurs. After that, I'll give you a bit more information about who we are as a team and as a company. And then at the end, we'll do the Q&A in an Ask Me Anything format and the Kindle giveaway. So for those of you who don't know, we give away Kindles at these things, and it goes to the person who asks the most on-topic questions. So if you haven't already, find the questions tool in the GoToWebinar software, and as we're going through the presentation, ask questions, and I'll then answer those at the end, as well as then we'll just do a free-form Ask Me Anything. So, just a sort of a very brief vignette about Infrascale before we dive into the meat of the presentation. At Infrascale, we're focused on building a complete data protection solution. What do I mean by that? Well, if I can take your eyes to the top left of this slide with the grey box, you'll see that we have a platform that combines cloud backup, disaster recovery, data archiving, and file sharing into one single pane of glass. When people ask me what companies do we admire or are we trying to emulate, I always say Salesforce, and people look askance because they think that's got nothing to do with our industry. But the genius of Mark Benioff and Salesforce in general was that they identified an industry, which was enterprise CRM, where old geriatric companies had stopped innovating. The cost to deploy was millions of dollars and the time to deploy was 6 months. And we think that the data protection industry looks just like that today. It's dominated by the likes of HP, IBM, and others who really haven't released any sort of major new innovations in a long, long time. It's ripe for innovation, and Infrascale is taking the data protection deployment time from months or weeks down to minutes, and we're taking recovery time down to minutes. I'm going to tell you more about that later on in the presentation. We've been around since 2006, headquartered in Los Angeles, and our approach seems to be quite popular. We're storing more than 20 billion objects today, more than 1,000 channel partners, and we're protecting 1 million devices, where that's usually a physical server, a virtual server, or a laptop. We run our own cloud at 16 different points of presence, and we support all the major cloud platforms out there. I'll talk more about that later. Some of our customers are here. You would have heard of Lockheed Martin or the American Red Cross, but one of the things I'm most excited about on this slide is the Gartner Cool Vendor Award in the bottom right-hand corner. And they just named us Cool Vendor in Business Continuity and Disaster Recovery. I'm going to talk a bit more about why they did that throughout the presentation. So before I go much further, let me turn the questioning back on you guys and let me ask you a question. How big is your business? The reason we do this is twofold. One, we like to make sure we're tailoring the content in these webinars appropriately based on our audience. And two, throughout the presentation, I'm going to be giving all sorts of examples. I want to make sure I'm giving appropriate examples. So if you can just reach forward, click on the screen, it's an interactive poll, and just give us a brief bit of information about how many employees you've got. All right, folks, great. The majority of you voted, or about 80% of you. Interesting distribution today. We've got 20% of you are more than 1,500 employees. 40% of you are between 100 and 500, and then the rest is sort of evenly split. So quite an interesting little U-curve we've got there. Let me go ahead and close that poll. Thanks for doing that. So let's get back to the core of the presentation. First, I'm going to talk about challenges with data protection in 2015. So this slide got a lot of numbers on it. I'm not going to read them all to you, but the overall premise here is that business today is living with a false sense of security. What do I mean by that? Well, most business leaders don't actually understand the state of their data protection regime. Us IT guys understand that it's far from perfect, and that in the case of true disasters, there are a lot of problems involved in getting back up online. Gartner's got an interesting statistic. 70% of the businesses they surveyed said they are not confident with the statement, our backup and disaster recovery operations are well managed and planned. Excuse me. Symantec has a statistic which is kind of scary as well. It's 60% of SMB data is not being backed up. And IDC recently quantified that the average cost of an hour of downtime in the United States is $20,000 per hour. And so whilst data has never been more important to us, and uptime and availability and the always-on business has never been more important, the state of our protection has never been worse. So one asks oneself, why is that the case? Well, the first reason is this concept of data fragmentation. If I can take you back 20 years to 1995, the data protection landscape looked like the left-hand side of this slide. We had our apps on-prem, compute was our most expensive resource, storage was less expensive, and we could sort of focus on what I call the data castle, which was really a data center, and you could focus on erecting walls around that for security and protecting all of your assets inside it. If you were worried about endpoint protection, you knew that that was a company-owned laptop running some variant of Windows, right? Now fast forward to today, the right-hand side, 20 years later, and everything's a mess, you know. Sort of the red does a good job of denoting that. But if you look in the data center, everything's now fragmented. The rise of virtualization has meant that you've now got a mix of physical and virtual apps. You've now got multiple hypervisors in play. You're probably running VMware and Hyper-V, maybe even some KVM. The rise of Windows as a really viable server-based operating system means that in the data center, you've now probably got some Windows, some Linux, and some Unix, and maybe some legacy systems. The rise of public cloud offerings means that all of your data is no longer inside the data castle, right? You've got data sitting out in clouds like in Salesforce.com and others. Then if we bounce out to user land, it's even more of a mess. The devices out there are no longer all company-owned. In fact, the majority of them are user-owned. You can't predict the operating system. It could be iOS, Android, Mac OS X, or some flavor of Windows. And all of this complexity and fragmentation leads to coverage gaps in our data protection regimes. And those coverage gaps translate into risk, not just for the businesses that we work in, but for all of us and each of you individually, because we're the guys who are on the line for protecting this data, and we're the guys who are going to lose our job if we don't. So why is this the state of things? One of the big reasons is the architecture of most backup solutions. So I'm going to pick on Backup Exec here because I really like picking on Backup Exec. And so this diagram shows a headquarters location where at the bottom I'm protecting an Active Directory server, a database server, and some apps. And I'm backing up over LAN speed at gigabit to a Backup Exec server that is then storing data on a media server. Well, okay, cool. So that sounds well and good. But as soon as you then sort of add in some additional devices to this mix, for example, road warriors, home users, branch offices, and smartphones, we start to see the breakdown in the client-server model. The client-server model simply doesn't support this type of fragmented data. And if you're worried about more than just backup, it gets worse still. So if, for example, I need long-term archiving, then I've got to introduce a second location. And I've got the little running man down here because in a surprising number of cases, archiving still involves humans taking tapes off-site, which correlates to a recovery point objective of days and a recovery time objective of weeks. It's a horrible, horrible technology, and yet it's still prevalent. And if we want to then add disaster recovery, that implicates the addition of a third location to our design. Now, here in DR, we've got a very short RTO and RPO, minutes, but boy, is it expensive. And so what we see is that the client-server model isn't great anymore for the reality of the data landscape we're trying to protect. And here's what I would do if I could wave a magic wand. First, I'd get rid of the additional sites. So I'd be able to homogenize this down and just worry about the site that I'm protecting. Then I'd have a magic cloud that provided disaster recovery services, backup services, and archive services in a single solution. And I'd make sure that my overall solution works well for branch offices, road warriors, tablets, and smartphones, in addition to the data I'm trying to protect in the data center. Well, that then beggars the question, why can't we have that? And the reason is guys like me. Guys like me have been one of the biggest problems for you as IT guys when it comes to data protection. What I mean by guys like me is product architects and CEOs of data protection companies. So in general, data protection companies have been asking you to make a sucker's choice for the last 20 years. And when I first pitched my marketing team on the idea of the sucker's choice, they didn't know what I was talking about. Maybe it's an Aussie thing. But a sucker's choice is a choice between two alternatives with the false premise that those are the only two alternatives available. With hybrid cloud backup, we assert that you should have a third option, an option C. The story I like to tell when I'm illustrating the sucker's choice is, imagine you walked into a restaurant, ordered the steak and fries. The waitress then said to you, "Very good, sir, would you like your steak to be stone cold or your fries to be stone cold?" And of course that's an idiotic question. You want a hot steak and you want hot fries. But that story is analogous to what's been going on in data protection. So the industry, have generally asked you to accept one particular model. For example, appliance-based backup, or being the client-server model on the right-hand side here, or more recently, direct-to-cloud backup. And the truth is that neither of these paradigms are perfect, but they each have pros and cons. So if we're looking at direct-to-cloud backup on the left, it's wonderful in that it can be immediately up and running. It's just software you can deploy tomorrow. It comes with unlimited capacity in the cloud that is redundant and resilient by its nature. The cloud is omnipresent. Every device can connect to it. But it's very slow, both to upload and to recover. The data leaves your network, so you have to depend upon vendor security. And if we think about client-server, it's got some good attributes. It's not all bad. First and foremost, it supports really large data sets because everything's working at LAN speed. You've got data sovereignty. You know exactly where the data is sitting. You can do quick recovery because, again, you're working over the LAN, and you can then back up that data to many locations. But, as we've discussed, it's lousy for supporting distributed data. Capacity planning is an absolute nightmare. You always underestimate the capacity you need or overestimate the capacity you need. On-prem enterprise disk is really expensive. Hardware is fragile, as Jason Buffington at ESG says. Bad things happen on site, right? And those on-prem expensive disks that you deploy are inherently destined to fail. And management of multiple appliances is a bear. So surely there could be a third way that combines the benefits of cloud-based backup with the benefits of on-prem backup without any of the limitations. And there is. So we're now going to talk about the transformation that's underway in the data protection industry. The first trend I want to talk about is the rise of hybrid cloud backup and DRAS. I've got this little evolution slide here. If we think about tape-based backup, this rose to popularity literally in the 70s, right, on mainframes and then Unix workstations. And tape has always been cheap, but it's not reliable. So in the 90s, we had the rise of disk-based backup, which was better but expensive. Then in the noughties or the 2000s, cloud backup became popular, but as we've discussed, it was slow. So then in 2015, most analysts, like the Gartner Group, will recommend that businesses adopt a disk to cloud backup pattern, also known as a hybrid backup solution. And as we sort of round the corner on 2015 and move towards 2016, InfraScale asserts that the best data protection paradigm that you can pursue is actually a new technology called DRAS or DRAS, where you've got push button failover. Not only do you have backup, but you have failover. The second major trend that's transforming the data protection industry is that the old walls that existed between solutions are coming down. When I studied computer science, I was taught that data protection could fall into these four buckets. You had your archive, your backup, your DR, and then failover or HA. And as you analyze these three things, you analyze them from three perspectives. RTO, or the time it takes you to recover, RPO, or the point at time which you are rewinding to, and TCO, total cost of ownership, also known as price. So here on screen, we're using bubbles, sort of these circles, to represent awesomeness, right? One full circle means only a little bit of awesome. 5 full circles means a lot of awesome. So if you look here, it says archive has a really bad RTO and RPO, but an awesome price. Go all the way through to failover on the right, and it says that it has an awesome RTO and an awesome RPO, but a really lousy price point. And what we want, ideally, is a solution that delivers a fantastic RTO, a fantastic RPO, at a fantastic price point. And because we're greedy, we prefer to get this all from one vendor that can support all your form factors and all your OSs, that can give you a simple solution that's scalable to meet your needs, that's secure, with great support, and a partner network. And so with that self-serving setup, let me introduce you to the InfraScale solution. And so at InfraScale, we're doing exactly that. We're delivering a fantastic RTO, a fantastic RPO at a fantastic price point. And I'll get more into the specifics of how this works toward the end of the presentation. But we move now into the big meaty reasons why we think the PBBA, or the purpose-built backup appliance, is, it's really time to retire that model. And the first reason is that it's just an expensive hardware trap. PBBAs, or client-server disk-based solutions, store all the data that you're protecting on local hardware regardless of the age or value of that data. And that then means that you have to over-provision your appliance capacity to accommodate data growth. When you buy a box, you have to make sure it's big enough to support today, tomorrow, next year, and the year after. Then, if you want the assurance of a disaster recovery solution, then you've got to buy a second appliance to store the replicated data. And of course, once your capacity fills up, you've got to buy another appliance for both the primary side and the secondary side. And what's madness about all of this is that on-prem enterprise disk that's used in these solutions is now more expensive than cloud-based storage. So why on earth are we stuck on this hardware hamster wheel, or the old way on this slide, where I buy a box, I deploy it, I fill it up, then I buy another box, I deploy it, I fill it up again. And more space constantly means that I need to get more appliance. Surely there could be a new way on the right-hand side of the slide where I've got my data, I back up to a thin, edge-based device that's intelligent, that can bring the power of the cloud into my infrastructure, meaning I can move workloads back and forth, and where more space just means more cloud. And that's what InfraScale's cloud spillover technology does. It's intelligent policy-based software that understands the type of data you're protecting, and it understands that not all data needs to be kept on-prem on high-speed disk. In fact, it can spill data over to the cloud based on the age and value of that data. And whilst it's intelligent out of the box, you can then modify the policies yourself. This eliminates the need for expanding local appliance capacity as your data needs grow. There's no longer any need to over-provision because this thing is elastic. Therefore, you can deploy for what you just need today and know that it will scale and stretch to meet the needs of tomorrow. And because it's inherently replicating, there isn't a need to buy a second piece of hardware for your second, remote location. And when I say cloud, people often ask me, which cloud am I talking about? And the answer is that InfraScale supports your cloud, our cloud, or any cloud. You can use our turnkey service delivered from 16 points of presence around the world. You can use your own private cloud infrastructure if you have that, or we support the major public clouds like Amazon and Azure, meaning that we're truly cloud agnostic and we don't lock you into one particular cloud like all the other data protection vendors try to do. And so that then brings me to the second chapter in this story of why the PBBA needs to go the way of the dinosaurs. And the second chapter is all about the rise of true DR solutions. And it's based on this fundamental premise. I'd love feedback on this. But we believe at InfraScale that most businesses use backup as a poor man's DR. What do I mean by that? Well, we believe all businesses want a solution that can deliver fantastic RTO, fantastic RPO at a fantastic price point. The problem is there's a huge amount of confusion in the industry, particularly about DR. I don't want you to read this slide. It's like an eye test. But what I do want you to know is that this represents 6 different architectures that are all variously described by analysts and journalists as disaster recovery. So if the term DR is a confusing term in your head and you can't clearly define what it means, welcome to the party, right? Because it's changing in real time. And there is no longer an accepted definition of disaster recovery. What I do want to draw your attention to, though, is the very right-hand side of this slide. If you remember what we said we were looking for, awesome RTO, awesome RPO, awesome price, you'll see that none of these solutions actually have that pattern, right? So why is that? Well, one of the principal reasons is that most disaster recovery solutions are grounded in this hardware-intensive approach. So in the old way, or the left-hand side of this slide, I've got a production box and I've got a failover site. And some people think, well, if I'm going to have failover, that'll cost me twice as much. Well, the truth is it's probably going to cost you 2.5 times as much, maybe 3 times as much, because you need bandwidth, people, and software to glue it all together. That's really, really expensive and really, really complex. Wouldn't it be better if there was some sort of cloud-based solution where you could push a button and, like Lazarus, your servers immediately came back to life? Well, before I answer that teaser question, I want to ask you all another question. And so this is going to be the second poll today. I want you to tell me where you stand when it comes to failover and DR. So option 1, I can fail over to a second site in under 60 minutes already. Option 2, boy, I wish I had failover DR, but I can't afford it. Or option 3, I don't think I need failover DR. I'll give you a few seconds here to answer that. This is a really important question for me to get an answer to. So if you can put down the pepperoni, wipe your greasy fingers, and click a button, it would be much appreciated. Only 56% of you folks have voted. Let's see if we can get a few more votes on the line here, and then I'll answer that question I just asked. Oh, one chap's got DR, but it takes him 2 days to fail over. Well, I think you can satisfactorily put yourself in the bucket of I don't have it, but I wish I had it. All right, folks. Well, we'll get back into it. So the results are in. 27% of you, just changed, 29% of you say that you can fail over to a second site in under 60 minutes. That's pretty cool. Congratulations to you guys. I wonder if that's all of your apps or just your mission critical apps. Feel free to type on the questions tool to give me a perspective on that. 65% of you put yourself in the second bucket. I wish I had that kind of failover DR, but I can't afford it. And then 7% of you say, I don't think I need failover DR. So that's really interesting results. Thanks, folks, for playing along in my little game here. Let's get back to the presentation. So I asked the question before we went to that poll, why can't we have a magical cloud-based solution that can bring our infrastructure back to life? The answer is you can with InfraScale's Cloud Boot. So with the combination of our cloud technology, our backup, and our virtualization technology, we've built a solution that allows you to recover servers, applications, and data in 15 minutes from the time you go down. It's the shortest recovery time objective in the industry, and it's delivered at a price point below most backup vendors. I'm going to talk about pricing in a few slides' time. And really importantly, it's easy enough for a fourth grader to use. What do I mean by that? You can do this yourself. You don't need to call anybody. This is push button simple. You don't need to call your IT guy. You can if you want, but it really is built for end user utilization, right? And you can use it for both micro failures and macro failures. And we've got a comment here from Patrick. Patrick's getting giddy. All right, Patrick, that's great. So let me sort of diagram out how this works. This slide shows happy state. I've got my end users, they're connecting to some apps. Let's say it's an Exchange box. They're doing their emails. Everything's cool. Those servers are being backed up to the InfraScale box in the middle of the screen, which is then being replicated out to a cloud. Now, Power Surge comes along and takes down all my production boxes. So my end users are now dead in the water. What do I do as an IT guy? Well, this is our worst nightmare, right? And for some weird reason, this always happens between 2 a.m. in the morning and 5 a.m. in the morning for some weird reason. So normally this is an absolute crisis. But with InfraScale, you log into the InfraScale portal from your iPhone or your iPad or your computer at home. You find the servers that have failed. You click Cloud Boot. You then answer if you want to bring those servers back up and running on our appliance or out in the cloud. InfraScale then recovers, restores, virtualizes, mounts, and boots that infrastructure all within 15 minutes, and your users reconnect and keep working. And that is why Gartner says we're the coolest vendor in business continuity and disaster recovery, because we're delivering 15-minute RTO and RPO to you at a price point lower than you'd get a backup solution from the likes of Symantec or Barracuda or others. And if folks want me to, I'll do a demo of this technology. So we do this by democratic vote. If you all want me to do a demo, type demo in, we'll keep track of that, and at the end of a few more slides time, I'll do a demo. But let me just rattle off a couple more reasons why the PBBAs need to go away. The next one is that they make you pick which one of your children you're going to save, right? Which is just crazy. So we said before, they're fine for tethered physical servers and virtual servers and tethered desktops if you still have them. But for your laptops, mobiles, branch offices, and remote workers, they just don't work. With InfraScale, you could protect all of that because of our hybrid cloud architecture, where your on-prem data will flow through an on-prem appliance and then replicate out to the cloud. Your roaming endpoints will just go straight to the cloud. And what do we support? Well, we support more than 100 versions of the major operating systems. And I'm not just talking about server operating systems like VMware, Hyper-V, Windows, IBM, Unix, and Linux, all of which we support. I'm also talking about endpoint operating systems like Mac OS X, and even down to smartphone operating systems like iPhone and Android. I like to say that InfraScale can protect your data wherever it sits, from mobiles to mainframes, and I think we're one of the only vendors in the world who can make that claim. And so this solution map gives you a sense of the breadth and depth of our solution, where we can provide you with cloud backup, DR, archiving and file sharing in one elegant solution that works anywhere on anything. And so building on that thread, PBBAs are just incomplete solutions, not just because of the source devices they protect, but because of all of the mucking around you've got to do to get them to work properly. Generally, they're pretty good at backup, but they don't generally have automated DR, they don't have things like WAN acceleration, they certainly don't have things like cloud spillover, and they're very expensive. So we were at a conference a few years ago, and over beers, a partner of mine said, Ken, to get a proper data protection solution going, I've got to cobble together 6 different solutions and then wrap it up with duct tape and baling twine. Well, why can't I just have a magic backup box that does it all for me? And we laughed. But that phrase, magic backup box, has become something of a catch cry at InfraScale. And so you can find designers and product managers and engineers huddled around whiteboards asking themselves what a magic backup box would look like. And here's what we think it looks like. It's a thin integrated device with the compute network and storage resources you need for super quick recovery, virtualization, and disaster recovery. It includes WAN acceleration technology for free, so you don't need to implement something like a Riverbed or a Silver Peak. It comes with cloud spillover technology, so you don't need to muck around with something like a Cterra or a NetApp SteelStore. It has all of the power and benefits of direct-to-cloud backup, like the immediate deployment, the omnipresence of the cloud, the resilience and redundancy that's inherent in that storage, but all of the power of an on-prem disk-based backup array. It's fast, it works at gigabit speed over the LAN, and it's actually easy to manage. And when I say easy to manage, I mean really easy to manage. We give you a cloud-based dashboard that works on your iPad or any browser that lets you manage all of your infrastructure. We've got one customer supporting 45,000 endpoints from a single dashboard. The second and last reason why the PBBA has got to go away is security, right? No one ever talks about security in data protection, and that's tragic. 2 recent breaches that were high profile, the breach at the Office of Personnel Management, the federal government, and the breach at Sony, both involved backup systems. Why? Because A, they contain all your data, so it's like a big juicy target for an intruder, and B, they're never secure. So imagine if bank vaults were never locked, right? You know the gold's in there, but it's not protected. That's what a typical backup system is in enterprise land. Absolute madness. InfraScale's always built security into its solutions from day one. We use a technique pioneered by the US Department of Defense in the 70s called double-blind encryption, which means your data is stored with an encryption key only you retain, we never get, and a second one that only we have and that you never get. And we and you have to cooperate to get that data out. It's just like the safety deposit box at the bank, where you need your key and the bank manager's got to be there with his key. This means that we're HIPAA compliant, CJIS compliant, we're doing business with the US Department of Defense and Department of Justice. Just this morning I saw that the US Coast Guard became a customer. We're PCI compliant, and we make sure that security is inherent in our solution. That extends to things like we've built in find my laptop and wipe my laptop functionality. So we don't just back up your endpoints, we can help you burn your endpoints to the ground if they're stolen, right? Think the smoking message Tom Cruise loses at the end of Mission Impossible when he's on the plane. Sometimes protecting data means destroying data. And that's why I continually say data protection, not backup or DR. So the last reason after security why there's got to be a new wave of data protection technology is the price point. If you've walked through an airport in America in the last 5 years, you would have seen a Barracuda ad. And look, a Barracuda device is the prototypical PBBA. It's got all the problems we talked about today. Doesn't have built-in double-blind encryption, doesn't support endpoint remote wipe. It's expensive. It's not particularly good in a hybrid environment. It certainly doesn't have cloud boot, cloud spillover, and 15-minute, boot and recover functionality. But what's crazy is that a Barracuda backup box for 10 terabytes with 3 years of cloud services will cost you $90,000. And that same level of protection from InfraScale, 10 terabytes and 3 years of cloud, will cost you $26,000 with all of the additional functionality I was talking about. And so it's time for you to get off legacy architecture. If you're using on-prem disk, it's time for you to evaluate cloud-enabled hybrid solutions like InfraScale. And we're not the only, we're not the only game in town, but we do believe that we've got the best solution at a breakthrough price point. And I'm just now going to tell you a little bit about InfraScale, and then we'll do a demo if you all want me to do that. So why do we do what we do? Well, we believe that every company has the right to recover their data from a disaster quickly, easily, and affordably. Everyone needs the peace of mind that comes with knowing their business data is always safe and available. And that's not just a motherhood statement. As an IT guy, I can tell you this: there have never been worse moments of fear for me than the sheer terror of being responsible for systems that thousands of people depend upon. Knowing that those systems are down and not being able to give anybody a clear answer on when they were coming back up. I wouldn't wish that experience on my worst enemy. And I remember back 15 years ago, I lost all of my data from university, all of my law notes from my law degree, and that was one of the worst days I had gone through at that point in my life. And again, I wouldn't wish that on my worst enemy. So from the top down here at InfraScale, we're deeply committed to the idea that your data needs to be both safe and available, and those two things are different, right, and equally important. And so how do we do all this? Well, we use the cloud. We use smart software instead of expensive hardware, and we build simplicity and security into our solutions from the ground up. So today we're protecting more than 100 petabytes of data, as I mentioned, 20 billion objects. Gartner just gave us the Cool Vendor Award. People at Storage Switzerland and ZDNet and other places are writing about us, so feel free to ask for analyst reports or case studies. We can provide you with a lot of information. And that brings us to the end of the canned presentation for the webinar. If people want me to do the demo, I'll do that next, but I'll just say this. Call us up, have a chat to us, get a free evaluation unit. We'll send you a unit that you can use in your rack and in your network to test out. You can deploy our software and play around with it, right? So we really encourage you to reach out to us. If you're interested in a free seed unit, into the questions tool type, I'd like an evaluation. My name's Ken. My email is this. My phone number is that. It's that easy. We'll actually then scrape through the logs and we'll follow up with you. So you don't even need to go and fill out a form. You can just type it into the questions tool. Okay, so let's, I think, Carla, what do you think? Did people ask for a demo?
Yeah, there are about 8 to 10.
10 people want a demo. Okay, 10 people out of 70, folks. So that's probably not enough. People want demos. A couple of more people saying they want a demo. All right, well, we'll call that enough. I'll do a quick fly through. How about that? So what I want to show you is I want to show you how easy it can be to recover from a disaster. Okay, so here's our scenario. It's 2 a.m., you're asleep. You get a phone call from your boss. He tells you that the Exchange server's down and the CEO's in Europe and he's about to do a big presentation. Nightmare scenario. What do? Here's what you do. You fire up the InfraScale management console. Right, so dashboard.infrascale.com. And as you can see here on screen, this gives me all sorts of visibility into the infrastructure that I'm managing and protecting. I've got alerts and a stoplight system that tells me what's important. But right now, I've got a job to do, which is to bring that server back up. So I'm going to go down through the appliances that I'm managing. And here you'll see I've got a bunch of appliances. The first one's not replicating to anything. Second one's replicating to a cloud. Further down my list, I've got some that are replicating to other appliances. But I can manage all of those appliances here from a single screen, right? You don't need to muck around with VPNs or connecting, to different networks, which is always a nightmare. It never works when you need it to. So I'm going to find the office that's affected, and then what I'm going to do here is I'm going to click into basically the data protection jobs that have occurred for that office. And so we'll see all of those here. And what I want to do, so in this scenario, I'm trying to recover Exchange. So we go over to Cloud Boot, and here you'll see a list of all the machines I can Cloud Boot. I look for the Exchange server and I click Boot, and then I get a wizard. So what I'm first going to do is pick the point at which I want to recover. Now, for this purpose, I just want to recover the most recent snapshot. Then I can configure my firewall rules and network restrictions. So I can restrict, I can set up a whole bunch of different rules. But for this demo, I just want to allow RDP so I can get into the darn thing. Now I want to put in who I want notified. I'm going to put my own email address in here. That's for when this thing is boot up and running. Now I'm going to wait very nervously. If I go over to the Active tab, we can see now that that Exchange server has been spun up and is running. So what I want to do now is I'm going to launch Windows Remote Desktop, because it looks like everything's cool. It looks like I'm back up, but I'm going to run Windows Remote Desktop and actually now log into the server to make certain that everything's cool. Okay. So what should happen, okay, so cool, I'm now into Windows Server Manager, so I am up and running. Let's make certain I've got network connectivity. So I'm just going to open up PowerShell here and ping Google. All right, ping's working, number 5 is alive. So I hope some of you get that reference. so that is how easy it is to bring back a server that's dead after you've had a disaster event. So I hope that demo was useful. I've got, oh, sorry guys, I got one more poll that I'm gonna pop here on screen before we go to the AMA. I'm just going to leave this poll up on screen as we do the AMA, and this one is sort of after today's webinar. Sort of tell me where you're at in your journey. A, I'm unhappy with my backup and DR system. You wouldn't be the only one. B, I'm changing my production infrastructure, like maybe you're virtualizing, and therefore I want to change my data protection as part of that. C, I'm happy with my backup system, but I'm interested in that push button DR you just demoed. Or D, I'm just learning. I myself attend a bunch of webinars just to keep abreast of what's going on. And while you're all answering that, we're going to turn to the questions. And I think we've got a good few on the line here. Remember, folks, that remember two things. We're giving away the Kindle to the person who asked the most on-topic questions. And two, if you'd like one of those free evaluations or demos, or just a demo, even if you don't want a free eval, just type it in. I want a personalized demo, or I want a free eval, name, email address, phone number. And now let's turn to the questions. Okay, we're going to start with Rich asks, with recent hacking of major organizations and the plethora of Cryptolocker-esque malware, what protection are in place to reduce risk? Rich, that's a wonderful question. So we have a lot of customers who we've saved from Cryptolocker, where Cryptolocker, trashes their network, and then we help them get their data back. And the double-blind encryption approach I was talking about earlier secures your data at rest, meaning that if those Sony hackers, if Sony had been running Infrascale's solution to back up their data, you know, it might have been a lot harder for those hackers, but most importantly, they wouldn't have lost all their data, because a lot of people don't know this, but on the way out at Sony, all the data got wiped, and they lost millions and millions of dollars worth of irreplaceable intellectual property. Crazy town. Kenny asks, oh, Kenny didn't get his pizza. Kenny, Carla will get in touch with you, and you'll get a free pizza tomorrow. Sorry about that. Okie dokie. Greg writes, we've been trying to replace backup to tape and backup to disk to tape for years. Our main challenge has been price. Is your price solution comparable to the cost of buying new tapes and disks on an annual basis? Yeah, Greg, it is. Any TCO analysis you do on our solution will show you that you can save money. Patrick says, does this tech support deduplication? Worried about WAN costs? Patrick, darn it, I didn't talk about this at all. So not only do we have our patented deduplicating file system, but we have over the WAN block level deduplication on the same level as something like a data domain deduping target array does. So yes, we use deduplication heavily to make sure we minimize the amount of data that we're firing across the network. Rich asks, on what level is deduplication done as the hardware is handling replication? So Rich, we're doing inline deduplication as data is ingested, then we're doing a post-process variable block length deduplication process, again using our DDFS, which is our patented file system. After that, we're doing over the WAN byte level deduplication against golden master block maps on the cloud side. So heavy use of deduplication throughout the system. In fact, you're likely to see data shrinkage rates upward of 90%. So if you need to store 100 terabytes worth of virtual machines, it's quite likely we'll pull that down to maybe say 10 terabytes of actual data to transfer. Patrick says, how does this classify data priority? Patrick, I'm not sure what you mean by that, mate. Maybe you could ask the question with a few more details. Greg writes, sounds good. I didn't see Commvault in the last list of vendors you were comparing. You know why, Greg? Because we would have had to like add a 0 to the matrix. So Barracuda in that example was 90 grand and we were 20 something. Commvault would have been over $200,000, right? They're just like crazy expensive. Okay, Craig says we only have DR for mission critical infrastructure. Craig, that's really common. So for those folks who said that they can fail over to a second site in under an hour, I suspect, well, in fact, I assert that they can't do that for all their apps. I assert they can only do that for some of their apps. And I would love everybody to come back fiercely and tell me I'm wrong. But we just completed a study that showed that of the 80% of companies that did say they could bring things back within 60 minutes, something like 65% of those companies could only do it for a select few mission-critical application infrastructures. And if you're interested in getting that study, shoot me an email at ken@infrascale.com or hit Carla up at team@infrascale.com because we'll be publishing that study in a week or two. Okay, so what's next? Brent asks what upload and download speed is recommended. Brent, we recommend that you have at least a 1 megabit connection to the public internet. Craig writes, does Infrascale work like Veeam so that it could cause an outage of the server being protected when the snapshot is deleted? Or does it work like Zerto so you don't need to worry about that? Craig, it works like Zerto so you don't need to worry about that. Okay, scrolling down to the next set of questions. Derek asks, will this affect performance of VMs? Derek, no, it won't. Because we integrate with the native APIs within Hyper-V and VMware, it does it in a very transparent manner from a performance perspective. You might see a 10% performance degradation for about 30 seconds, right? Not a big deal at all. Derek says, will it handle 50 VM backups? Derek, it will. You can run up to 200 VMs in our cloud boot scenario at once, and that all processes in parallel. So up to 200 VMs, and you're going to be able to handle that out of the box. If you want to go bigger than that, we'll just daisy chain a couple of boxes together. Greg wrote, I'm impressed with what I've seen so far, much, much more than the low expectations I started with. Wow, Greg. I'm not sure how to take that, man. Perhaps it was the photograph of me early on that put you off. Craig writes, I've been in touch with, oh, sorry, that's not actually a question. Okay, my bad. Rich writes, how would Infoscale handle a crypto infection that goes unnoticed after hours? Does Infoscale provide a rollback if data should ever be corrupted? Absolutely, Rich, we do. In fact, you saw in my demo me rolling back to a snapshot. If that one was stuffed, I could roll back to the one before that, or the one before that, or the one before that. And by default, we keep an unlimited history of snapshots. You can modify that yourself, but out of the box, it's unlimited. We're, I think, the only vendor, at least I'm aware of, that does that. Greg writes, no, nothing you said, years of watching webinars of products that didn't look good. Okay, great. Rich says, on the cloud level, we've seen Dropbox and Barracuda fall victim to this with their DRM backup solutions, referring to the Cryptolocker and versioning thing. Yeah, Rich, you know, those are, Dropbox is a sync product, so it's not a backup product. Barracuda is a backup product, but they don't support unlimited versioning, so they are still subject to this issue. Sean says, how are the standards between backup, DR, and archive established? Sean, there isn't really international global standards. You've got academics who put forth the framework that I talked about earlier, but it's changing. It's changing in real time. So 3 years ago, well, no, let's make this easier. 10 years ago, if you ask somebody what's backup, what's archive, what's DR, there was a clear answer. Fast forward to today, and there's not. I'm in pretty frequent contact with the analysts at IDC and Forrester and Gartner and the 451 group and ESG, and we all agree that the walls that used to exist between these different solutions are fast being eliminated with hybrid solutions like Infoscale that deliver the awesome RTO and awesome RPO of a failover solution, but do it at the awesome price point of an archiving solution. Got a few folks here who would like a demo or evaluation unit. Just remember, folks, if you want an evaluation unit, name, email, phone number. Okay, next one. Sean says, how is encryption security maintained between our site and your cloud? So Sean, it's built into our solution with the double-blind encryption that I referred to. That's our ultra-safe technology. Sean also asks, are there preferred partners within the Infoscale ecosystem, e.g. Amazon, AWS over Azure? Sean, we're cloud agnostic, so we obviously recommend our own cloud service. If you don't want to use that, we then, we've got equal support for all of those. Ned writes, how do you protect from losing the appliance in the data center? Do you replicate between Infoscale appliances? Ned, yes, we do. Patrick writes, OMG. Patrick, I hope that was the demo, buddy. Okay, cool. Sean says, what has been the experience with VMware virtual servers, integration with vMotion, etc., issues with distance, etc.? Sean, no issues. We work with both vCenter and individual vSphere environments. We've got first-class support for VMware and have had for years. No issues there. Greg says, pinging Google is my favorite way to test the internet. Greg, you're in good company, mate. Sean says, are there roles/security with Infoscale? Yes, Sean, that dashboard you saw me use has 4 different layers of role types that you can use. Todd says, in the webinar, you mentioned the choice between either appliance or cloud recovery. Which one do you recommend? Todd, it's horses for courses, mate. There are environments where a local recovery is good, usually a micro failure. If a motherboard dies on you, I don't know that you really want to fail everything out to the cloud. So for micro failures, I tend to trend local. But for macro failures, flood, fire, storm, Hurricane Sandy, the cloud's wonderful. Okay, Brent says, where are your CGIS secure facilities located? Brent, I don't know the answer to that, and I'm actually not certain I'd be allowed to tell you if I did. The next question is, Justin says, how is Infoscale able to provide such high RTO, RPO, and price over all your competitors? Well, Justin, as I mentioned later in the deck, we harness the power of the cloud to break through the disaster recovery price performance barrier. We prioritize intelligent software over dumb hardware. We build simplicity and push-button ease into our solutions, and we bake security in from day one. And that's what yielded the result you've heard about today. Craig writes, while I'm happy with our current backup and DR solutions, we don't have one that does everything really well. I'm still trying to figure out if yours does everything that well. Craig, one great way to find out is to type your name, phone number, and email address into the questions tool saying you'd like a demo. And try it out for yourself. Sean writes, oh, we've got a bunch more questions. Carla, are you keeping tabs on who's asking the most?
Yeah.
All right. Sean says, assume the implementation can be done as an evolution, take on systems over time, not a rip and replace. Sean, absolutely. Pay as you grow, scale from 1 terabyte to 1 petabyte if you like. Brent says, is Cloud Boot available for physical machines too, or only VMs? Brent, we do it for physical, and this is one of my pet peeves in the industry. So many vendors say they do things like Cloud Boot, but they only do it for VMware. We do it for Windows Physical as well. Jerry says, how are end users redirected to the cloud server when needed? Jerry, our system just automatically handles the routing and orchestration, so you don't need to worry about that. Lee says, do we install agent programs on every device? Lee, you can deploy in both agentless mode and an agent-based mode, depending upon your priorities for your architecture. Hyun writes, the scalability is great, but how do I restore a system with terabytes of data over a slow link to the cloud? Hyun, the benefit of having a hybrid cloud system is you've got a local copy of your most critical data, so you can recover that at gigabit speed over the LAN, and it's only the other data that's sitting up in the cloud. Also, if you do a cloud boot, you don't need to worry about pumping that data over the WAN. Just boot your stuff in the cloud and access it there. John says, running from the cloud in DR, I worry about the speed. Have you found that to be a problem? John, no, I haven't. When you saw my demo, it looked pretty fast, right? And that's because it's all happening in the cloud data center. Brent says, is cloud booting the machine on the local device or from the cloud? Brent, there's cloud boot and there's local boot. That's sort of the two catchphrases, right? So cloud boot means booting it in the cloud, and local boot means booting it on the local appliance. Jerry says, is price based on storage or number of servers? Jerry, it's based on the amount of data you're protecting, so storage. Derek writes, we've got a building in China. Would this solution work with them as well, even though bandwidth is very bad there? Derek, it would. Because you've got that on-prem box, it's going to protect fast, and then it's going to replicate out to the cloud as quickly as it can. All right, folks, I'm going to move into rapid fire mode because we've only got 5 minutes left. How is capacity supported on the landing zone? We measure it based on protected storage. Do we do DR for Oracle? We do, yeah. We've got some scripts that will handle Oracle and work with RMAN. Can you schedule the cloud transfer and limit the data rate? Yes, you can. Quite a sophisticated scheduler and traffic shaping tool built in. Is an appliance required in the branch office? It's not required, it's recommended. And remember, everything we sell as an appliance in hardware, we also sell as a virtual appliance in software. We currently operate on a 10 megabit download. In the event of a failure and need to use failover, what is the recommended download speed for recovery or failover? Rich, again, you don't need to worry about that. Spin it up and boot it in the cloud and connect to it. 10 megabits will be fine. Jerry says, do you compare with Dell Aperture? Jerry, we do compare very well with Dell Aperture. You should get in touch with us and ask for one of our competitive battle cards. How do you license capacity? Based on the storage amount. As you have a unique key that protects and ensures your access to the file system, what protections and alerts exist over your personnel accessing our data? With double-blind encryption, it wouldn't matter if our personnel access the data. As one journalist said, with InfraScale, even if one of their employees goes to the dark side, your data is still safe. Can you restore at the file level? Yes, we can. What if I'm backing up a VM? You can do both file level recoveries or VM level recoveries. Do you need to change DNS when using Cloud Boot? Yes. Does the dedupe take place on the client? Yes. Is the data at rest stored in compressed UDIP format? Yes. To what degree has your solution been tested? Example with Hurricane Sandy. 1 million devices are being protected with the InfraScale platform today. SQL and Exchange data are the most important. OS on servers and desktops less so. Are there any data protection tiers? Absolutely. You can tier the infrastructure and the retention patterns. We've got native support for SQL and Exchange, including things like mailbox and message level recovery. With the current DR site I have, I can bring up the VMs at the DR site, but have to change the IP address for each VM on the DR site so that they can be accessed. Do I have to do the same with InfraScale? Depends on how you set it up, but no, if you follow our guidelines, you wouldn't have to do that. Does it support VMware CBT? Yes, it does. Global dedupe across Hyper-V? Yes. I checked with the receptionist, no one delivered anything. Kenny will fix that for you. Does archiving utilize stubbing? John, I don't know what stubbing is. Please elaborate. Does EMC have a competing product? No. Will they adapt Avamar or data domain to performance functions? Probably not. They'll probably buy somebody because they're not that awesome at innovating anymore. Our last disaster resulted in 2 terabytes of data loss when all but 2 drives on a RAID failed. We spent 2 days recovering data from the on-site box. What kind of time are we looking at on data pulled down from the appliance and redeployment of the virtual servers? Well, from the appliance, it's going to be minutes and only limited by the speed of your local LAN. Do you support vSphere 6? Yes. The 10 terabyte cost you mentioned, is that using Infrascale Cloud? Yes. Does that include DR testing? Yes. Do you work with many law enforcement agencies in the US? Yes. At the municipal and state level, we work with many. We're the only cloud data protection vendor I'm aware of that has a CJIS compliant offering. Are all versions of Hyper-V supported? 2K8R2, 2K12, 2K16. Well, those 3 are supported, but that's actually not all the versions. So there's some others that we don't support, but those 3 are supported. Maximum local capacity today, 600 terabytes. How do you price? By storage. Golly, they keep coming. Does this work with SharePoint as well? Yes. Okay. Sorry if I'm going too fast, folks. How easy is this to implement? You can be up and running tomorrow. We've got a bunch of people who want an eval unit. Cool. Can you back up devices from different networks? Yes. We have users in the field 95% of the time with laptops and phones. This is perfect for you then. The hybrid infrastructure means that they can just connect directly to our cloud. You mentioned the cost is based on protected data. Is there an option to base it on deduplicated and protected data? Yes, if you're going a private cloud option. When you're talking to Infrascale folks, talk about wanting to do a private cloud option. Can you back up from the cloud to the LAN once failed hardware is replaced? That's called failback, and absolutely yes, we can. So boot in the cloud, run your stuff, rebuild your network, fail back locally. Can field users be backed up to the cloud without backing up to the appliance? Yes, absolutely. That's the primary idea of the hybrid solution. Do you have a virtual appliance option? Yes, we do. Does this require a software agent on every protected device? No, we don't. There's both agent-based and agentless support. Are there special requirements for domain controller backup and recovery? Not particularly. Can you exclude files by file types from backups? Yes. I didn't get a pizza. Okay, Brent, we're going to follow up with you. John says stubbing, link to the left behind in place of the file, seamless archiving. Oh, like sparse files and mount points for directories. Yeah, we do support sparse files. Where are we at? Bare metal recovery, yeah, so bare metal recovery is built into both similar and dissimilar hardware. Is your hardware standard off-the-shelf components? Yeah, inside the box, it's an Intel chip and standard componentry. Minimum storage purchase. We've got a solution that starts at like, I think $1,200 a year. Derek writes, can you manage multiple users and their level of access? Yes. Am I able to isolate individual user profiles from the backup, i.e. a vendor's temporary profile on an on-site off? I don't know what you mean by that, Rich, I'm sorry. Ned says disk throughput megabits per second for an appliance. We get about 6 gigabits of sustained throughput on ingest. So, the limits of SAS-based RAID controllers is really the answer there. Patrick, are you faking your awesome accent? I am. I'm actually from Alabama, and this has just been a little test run. Cool. That's the end of the game, people. I'm sorry. I have to run to my next thing. Carla, do we have a winner of the Kindle? Sean Mulligan. Sean, you are the proud new owner of a Kindle coming your way. Folks, you're going to get an email with the slide deck, an email with a link to the video of today's webinar and the Q&A. I want to remind you, my email address is ken@infrascale.com, and I'd love to hear from you all, good, bad, or otherwise. Thanks for paying attention, and hopefully I'll talk to you on another webinar. Thanks, everyone, and have a wonderful day.